All right, so today we're going to tie a very simple pheasant tail nymph, which is, hey, it works to catch fish, and it's a great fly to learn as your first fly. So we need to start by getting the thread onto the hook. And what you want to do is, as you wrap the thread, you want to make sure you go over the thread you're holding. So notice I'm wrapping a little bit more towards the back to bind it down. Then I'm going to hold the thread at an angle, this free piece at an angle, so it's protecting the hook point. And that's going to let the thread, as I wrap, I'm going to wrap turns that touch each other. And as I wrap backward, that's going to guide the thread so they end up touching, and also so that they don't end up touching the hook point, because that's how you cut your thread. And yes, we've all cut our thread. So I'm going to bring that back until I'm past the hook point and I'm lined up pretty much at the end of the straight section of the hook shank. Cut off my excess thread, and now I'm ready to start. When you're tying nymphs especially, you're always tying from the back and work your way towards the front. So I'm going to start with a little bit of, I'm going to actually start by putting in some, I'm not going to use that copper wire because that one hasn't been started yet. So I'm going to use a bright copper wire. So I'm going to use a small piece of copper wire. When you use copper wire, that wire is you always want it to be one of the coated copper wires, because otherwise it's going to turn green on you if you get it wet a few times. So to tie it in, I'm going to bring the thread back forward and bring it up so it's going to come about a third of the way back from the hook eye. And then I'm going to lay the copper wire alongside the hook on my side and start wrapping over it as I go back again. This is going to do two things. It means the copper wire isn't going to pull out, and it also means that I'm making a nice smooth body. Everything's nice and smooth. All right, I'm now back towards the rear again. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this pheasant tail, and I want to take some of the fibers. I'm going to pull some of the fibers off, enough to be my tail. And I want to pull them off so that they're 90-degree angle to the shaft of the feather. And then I just pull those out. So keep them together. Now I want the tail, the part of the tail that hangs off, to be a little bit less than the length of the shank of the hook. So I'm going to lay that on top. And I'm going to start winding a couple of turns right at the back to hold it in place. If I like the way that looks, then I'm just going to wind forward, wind forward, wind forward. And then I'm going to go back again. So I'm still building up a body. I'm building up a little bit of the thickness of the body. And this excess I'm just going to snip off. Now, next step is to wind on some of more of the pheasant tails. The pheasant tail is the tail. It's most of the body. That's what makes it such a simple fly. This time I'm going to take a little bit more of the pheasant tail than I took for the tail. A few more fibers, because this is going to build up the bulk of the body. Again, I tear them away. And in this case, I'm going to switch hands and hold them so the tips are facing forward, and I'm going to snip the tips off because they're very weak. I'm going to do this where you can't see it, it's just easier. Now I'm going to lay them down, and again, putting part of it down, getting to about 2/3 of the way up the shank, and I'm going to bind that down. Again, I've built the body up a little bit. I'm going to make sure, though, I'm going all the way back to where my tail started. and then I'm going to go forward, again back to that 2/3 point. Now I want to wrap the pheasant tail around the shank. I want to keep it taut. I'm going to go just wrap it in turns that touch, and I find it's easier to put my finger on the back every time I go around. Put my finger on the back. So I go around, press, around, press, and that's my last time. And then while I'm holding it, I bring the thread up to clamp it into position. 1, 2, 3 times will do it, and then 2 times in front. Now it's not going anywhere. You now clip off. Now this is important. I put my finger between the thread, so I'm pushing the thread away from me, and that way I can hold on to the pheasant tail, clip it off without clipping the thread. All right, now I have my copper wire. Now, when I wound before, I went up and over the top. I'm going to go the opposite direction. So the copper wire is going to cross over many fibers of the pheasant tail. So holding it taut, and I want to wrap a number of turns fairly open, almost like I'm building segments. I'm going to do probably 5, maybe 6 turns going forward. Now, I'm going to bring the wire forward, bring the thread over the wire, grab the wire, bring the thread in front of the wire. Now, over the wire, in front of the wire. One more time, over the wire, in front of the wire. I can now break the wire off, and the easiest way to do that is hold your thread tight, helicopter, your wire is off. Now we need so we've tied on the abdomen. We have a tail and an abdomen. We need to build up the thorax. Guess what? More pheasant tail. Again, I'm going to want a fairly decent chunk of pheasant tail. Let me get that on there, because this is going to represent, I'm going to use this for the legs and for thorax. So I want to be thinking here about how much of this is going to end up going forward. So I'm going to have some of this go forward, and eventually it's going to get folded underneath. So I'm trying to think about the length I'm going to use for that. And then I'm going to flip it around. So that's now pointing over the back. It's going to end up in front eventually. So once I've measured that, by measuring against the hook, again, it's measured along the length of the hook. When I bring it to here, I'm going to fold it under. I like where that is, so I bring that over. Now I'm going to bind this down, and I'm going to go all the way to the hook eye and back. All the way to the hook eye and back several times. I'm going to need some dubbing, something to build up the body here. There are a lot of ways you can do this. I'm just going to use a dubbing that works with the color. So I'm going to go with a brown dubbing. And what you see, I have some in here, and I'm going to just pull out. I don't need a lot. That's far more than I need. That's, whoops, where's my, right, that's far more dubbing than I need. So I'm going to pull about half of that off, leave it on my desk. I can use it for the next fly. Pull the thread down a little bit, and now to dub it on, I'm going to use a little bit of wax just to make it a little stickier. And I'm only going down about 1.5 inches. And I'll lay the dubbing right against the thread, and it will tend to stick to the thread, and then I'm going to spin it. Spin it in my fingers, and spin it, and spin it, and build up, and just wrap it the same way I wrapped before, and then I can spin it some more to make it thicker, to tighten it up. And I probably have all I need, so I can now pull off any excess. Spin that. I can go, okay. I go back over it just to hold it in place. Now, this extra here, I don't need. So I'm going to clip that off tight to the front. Now, I'm going to grab all of this other fiber, and I want to bring this up over the back. And when I bring it over the back, all those fibers, I want to bring them up over the back, and I want to try to flatten them out with my thumb. Actually, first I want to bring the thread up to the very front. Now I bring them over the back, flatten it out so it covers as much of the back as possible. And I'm going to first turn loosely, second turn loosely to make sure I like where it sits. Then I can go tighter. Now I'm going to take the fibers that are going forward and I'm going to try to fold them. First spread them to either side and then fold them backward. Once they're folded backward, I can wrap over them, and now I have created, whoops, and my fly just slipped. So I start over again because my vise was not tight enough. I'll tighten it up again. We're back where we were. I'll go back to folding it over. And no problem there. You could always go back and redo something if you're not happy with it. Again, in front, loose turn to hold it, tighter turns, split the fibers, fold them back, several turns to hold everything in place. We're essentially finished tying the fly, but what I'm going to do is I need something to hold the thread in place. So I'm going to take a little bit of head cement. I'm just going to touch it, put a little bit right on the thread. I'm going about an inch down the thread. Now I'm going to use a whip finish tool, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see how that works. I'm going to lay that right on the thread, fold back over, and then just let it spin into place. 1, 2, 3, 4 times around. Take the base off, keep tension, bring the tip down, snug it, clip, and you have, slightly out of focus, complete fly. Now we can spin it slightly so you can see the back, you can see the legs, and you can manipulate those legs a little bit if you like, and then we drop the fly. So a first fly, it's simple. The nice thing is it has a little bit of flash in the brightness of the copper wire, and it looks like something alive in the water, and that's all that counts. So that's our first fly. Again, a pheasant tail nymph. Thank you.